So what the fuck is plant medicine? Let's start there. Hey everybody, David here with the Plant Medicine for PTSD podcast. Before we get into today's topic, just take literally 1 second, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on here. Most folks are probably listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts anyway, but if you're on YouTube, take a second, hit subscribe. It actually goes a very long way to helping somebody else like you find these messages who maybe needs to hear it right now. So just, if not for yourself, do a favor for somebody else who needs to hear this. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. With that said, we actually have a lot of new people checking us out recently, which makes me want to do this video to kind of revisit a few basic things. Thanks to the Instagram algorithm gods, we've got a lot of new eyeballs on our stuff. So I want to take a second and just kind of go through a few basic things that I want you guys to understand about plant medicine and about what we do. So first of all, we keep saying plant medicine. The podcast is called the Plant Medicine for PTSD podcast. So what the fuck is plant medicine? Let's start there. Honestly, plant medicine is not a good term for this stuff at all. For one thing, mushrooms aren't even plants. It's a fungus, which is like a whole different thing completely. MDMA, not a plant. So plant medicine really just refers to, I guess, like cannabis, ayahuasca, ibogaine, things like that. Like Cambo and Bufo come from a frog, or a toad technically. So the term plant medicine is really not a great word for this stuff at all. But plant medicine has sort of become synonymous with psychedelic medicines. That's really what we're trying to describe here. Like psychedelic medicines, you'll hear the term entheogens, empathogens even. Really, I think the term plant medicine kind of got adopted because the overlords of Facebook and Instagram and all those places censor the crap out of the actual terms that we want to be using. Just part of the man trying to keep us down, you know? So we have to use euphemisms like plant medicine. So that's probably the number one reason that you hear that term used so much. I don't think people will really tell you that, but that's my suspicion. So when we say plant medicine, we're just kind of referring to psychedelics, specifically using them with intention, which we're going to talk a lot about. So in a medicinal, in a therapeutic kind of a vibe, not just recreationally. So that's really all that we mean when we say plant medicines, and it's really not a perfect term. So I'll say that, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, I've been looking into these Chinese herbs for anxiety." I'm like, "That's awesome," but I'm talking about mushrooms. So that's what I mean when I say plant medicine. And by the way, it's not just like a hippy-dippy, flowery term for this stuff. We do call it medicine because it's not just a drug. Like, I truly believe that the intention behind why you are consuming something is what elevates it from taking drugs to working with medicine. And it's not to say that you can't use these things recreationally. I've certainly had breakthroughs of various kinds, just kind of having fun. But again, when we're talking specifically in the context of our program, but really any attempt to heal or to improve your mental health by using psychedelics, it really is going to come down to the work that you are going to put in on yourself. These things aren't going to magically fix you. So I would say when I use that term plant medicine, I'm almost thinking of it as like medicine with a capital M. Like how you might hear like a Native American medicine man describing it, like the great medicine in the sky or some shit. Like I'm not going to pretend to be Native American. Read a bunch of books though about that stuff. So again, when I'm using the term plant medicine, we're referring to like psychedelic medicines used therapeutically, used intentionally, used not just how you might take aspirin to treat a headache or antibiotics to treat an infection, but like medicine for your soul and for your psyche. So if that's what plant medicine is, begs the next question, who is this for? When do we prescribe that medicine, if you will? The short answer is this is for everybody, short of if you have a genuine diagnosis or family history of schizophrenia. If you're someone who already has a very tenuous grasp on reality, we don't really want to be playing with that and making that grasp even looser by taking psychedelics. But short of that, I mean, all the clients that we work with, a lot of veterans, a lot of first responders, and a lot of just normal people who have been through some shit in life. And they want to feel more presence. They want to feel more peace internally. They want to feel more connected to their loved ones, and they just want to be happier. So if you're someone who checks any of those boxes, then this stuff could be for you. The big caveat here is that it is almost never the correct choice to just jump straight into a large dose or to go straight to an ayahuasca retreat or an ibogaine retreat. That's not to say that you have to graduate from like, first I'll use cannabis and then I'll use mushrooms and then LSD and then I'll be ready for ayahuasca. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you need to have some level of self-awareness, some level of emotional intelligence. You have to have some relationship with yourself through journaling, meditation, prayer. You need some sort of mindfulness practice. And ideally, yes, you have cultivated some sort of relationship with the medicine through intention setting, through listening to your inner voice, trying to quiet your mind enough to listen to the messages that are coming into you. Whether you want to call that God or the universe or the medicine or your intuition, we need some ability to quiet down the mind to be able to hear the messages that the medicine is going to show us one way or another. So that's why I say jumping straight into a retreat is really a pretty bad idea for most people. And we'll talk a lot more about this, but truthfully, this is the purpose of our mindful microdosing program, is to help people build that relationship, to prepare for a bigger retreat like that, or to integrate those lessons afterwards. Or honestly, for a lot of people, it's sufficient on its own. You can go through this microdosing program and never really need to go on a retreat after that because you've cultivated all of these tools within yourself. One other point to make on that question of who is this for? I've definitely met some folks who are worried that this is not for them, perhaps because they have a history of drug addiction and they want to just be completely sober and not touch any substances ever. Or maybe they've had a bad experience with psychedelics in the past and they're a little bit scared off from it. Or maybe they're a cop who's arrested somebody for this stuff, has literally put people in jail, and now they're going to use these same tools to heal themselves. That's a fucking moral conundrum right there. So first of all, if you're somebody who's completely sober, I respect the hell out of that. Good for you. But I think that if you're abstaining from plant medicine because of your sobriety, I think you're actually looking at this a little bit wrong. And I would encourage you to go listen to our podcast with this dude, Billy Evans, who got clean from heroin and meth through the use of mushrooms. So again, not to make this whole spiel about addiction, but I think that drug addiction or alcohol addiction, those are not the problem itself. Those are a solution to a deeper underlying problem. So by abstaining from plant medicine, you're actually avoiding another potential solution. Like Billy's a perfect example, having worked with mushrooms both in a retreat context and in our microdosing program. Like, he's not that guy anymore who even has that problem that he sought the drugs to solve. So again, like I'm not trying to minimize that aversion to everything. If you're just in sobriety and you're staying in your lane and just like closing the door on everything else, I understand that. But I think that you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, by shutting down this avenue of approach. So I would encourage you, if that's you, go listen to that podcast and see what Billy has to say. He'll speak about it better than me because I've never been in that position. So that's one thing. The other thing that I hear pretty often is like, oh, I ate mushrooms back in college and I had a bad trip and now I'm scared of ever going back there. And that makes a lot of sense also. I'm actually shocked that more people have not had worse experiences just eating mushrooms recreationally. This is the whole reason that our program is structured the way that it is, where we lay a foundation to start working with the medicine, to make sure that your mindset is correct, to make sure that your environment is correct, and to kind of set the conditions where a more positive experience is more likely. Because we always kind of joke, but like, if you slept like shit, you wake up, you scroll TikTok or Instagram, you pound 2 cups of coffee, and then you take your microdose, you now have turbocharged anxiety. So if you're someone who had baseline anxiety or depression, had no level of self-awareness, you're in a shitty environment around people who like have just a bad energy about them, and then you eat 5 grams of mushrooms one day in college, like, you're guaranteed to have a fucking horrible experience. So that doesn't surprise me that that happened. And all that I want to say to you, if that is you, is like, this is going to be completely a different experience. That's like saying I went to a bad part of town one time and I got jumped. Therefore, I don't ever want to train martial arts because I had a bad experience with violence this one time. Like, that's not even the same thing at all. Doing something like the mindful microdosing program is like going to jiu-jitsu class and learning how to actually navigate that space, getting tools so that you can actually use things in that world, as opposed to just getting jumped by eating 5 grams of mushrooms and getting your ass kicked for a few hours and never wanting to do that again. That last thing I mentioned of working with cops who have genuinely arrested people, like that sucks. That's a moral issue that they all have to deal with inside of themselves. It says a lot about the landscape of the ridiculous laws that we have in the US and Canada, where some people are definitely playing in a bit of a legal gray area, to say the least, in order to access these things. As one of our Canadian clients said to us recently, he spent over $15,000 Canadian dollars, which is monopoly money, to be fair, but he spent over $15,000 in 2025 pursuing his own healing after realizing that the VAC, which is like the Canadian version of Veterans Affairs, the only thing that they ever offered him were chemicals, and when that didn't work, they offered him death through the medical assistance and dying program, and he didn't like those options. So he had to go looking outside of the medical system, which for some people means looking outside the boundaries of what's 100% legal. But there's no question in my mind that where we are right now with psychedelics is where the world was with cannabis 10, 15 years ago, where some of the laws are starting to change. We're starting to realize, like, oh, this is not a narcotic. This has the potential to help people so incredibly much. It has the potential to be very destructive as well. But hey, if you have a hammer, you can build a house, or you can hit yourself in the dick with it. The tool itself is not the decision of whether this is good or bad. It's how it's used. So if that's a conundrum for you, so to speak, the morality, legality, or ethics of this, I would encourage you to just have a more open mind about it, perhaps. Listen to a few more of the stories. Listen to some of the folks that we have worked with who have a background in law enforcement. Like, we have a podcast with a gentleman named Nick who spent like 20 years working SWAT and child sex crimes before leaving work because of his PTSD and ultimately finding a lot of healing in plant medicine. So all of that is to say, this stuff, it really is for everybody when approached correctly and when approached with care. So in subsequent videos, we'll get a little bit more into some of the myths around this stuff, clear up some of the misinformation that's out there, and talk a little bit more about how microdosing specifically works, because I think that's perhaps the thing that there's the least info on. My conspiratorial brain says that's because there's no money to be made in it. That's why we have all these ibogaine clinics. That's why there are like large-scale ayahuasca retreat centers. Nobody's really profiting off of microdosing, so there's very little incentive to get that information out there. And I mean, look at me. I run a microdosing coaching program, and here I am bringing you that information. So all of that said, one more time, if you haven't already, like this video, hit subscribe, send this to a buddy of yours who you know is struggling with their mental health and is ready to look outside the box for a new solution. And I'll see you in the next video.